The night she slept on cardboard beside a Brooklyn dumpster, Zoe Carter had no idea a man in a $10,000 suit was watching her. She didn't know her mother's broken pendant would mark her for death, or that the most dangerous man in New York was about to become her only chance at survival. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because, tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now back to the story. The thing about sleeping on the streets of Brooklyn in late November is that the cold doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care that you worked a double shift scrubbing toilets, or that your boss fired you because his wife didn't like the way you smiled, or that the rooming house you could barely afford burned down 3 nights ago with everything you owned inside it. The cold just comes. Zoe Carter pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders and pressed her back against the metal shutter of a closed bodega. The cardboard beneath her had gone soft with moisture, but it was better than concrete. Barely. Her worn sandals, held together with duct tape and prayer, sat beside her like faithful dogs that had given up on fetching anything worthwhile. She clutched her purse to her chest. Inside, $17, a Metro card with 1 ride left, a pack of crackers, and a photograph of a woman she barely remembered but would never forget. Her mother. Dead 20 years now, when Zoe was just 6 years old. The only other thing she had from her mother was the pendant around her neck, a tarnished silver half-moon, broken jaggedly down the middle like someone had snapped it in two. Zoe's mother had pressed it into her palm the night she died and whispered, "Keep this safe, baby. Promise me." Zoe had promised. She'd kept a lot of promises to dead people. Above her, the November sky looked like someone had given up on painting it. No stars. Just the murky orange glow of city lights reflecting off low clouds. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. A car alarm screamed and went silent. A couple argued in Spanish 3 doors down. Normal Brooklyn symphony. Zoe closed her eyes and tried to remember what warmth felt like. She almost succeeded. Then she heard the car. Not just any car, the kind that purred instead of rattled, the kind with an engine that probably cost more than most people's weddings. Zoe didn't open her eyes. Rich people sometimes drove through this neighborhood on their way to somewhere better. She'd learned not to look. Looking made you a target for either pity or cruelty, and she wasn't sure which one felt worse. But the car stopped. Right in front of her. Zoe's eyes snapped open. The black SUV sat there like a panther deciding whether you were food. Tinted windows. Chrome was so polished it looked illegal. The engine idled with a sound like money folding itself. Zoe's heart kicked into a rhythm her body couldn't afford. She sat up slowly, fingers tightening around her purse. Every instinct she developed in 3 years of barely surviving screamed the same thing. Run. But before she could move, the back door opened. A man stepped out. And Zoe forgot how to breathe. He was tall, over 6 feet easy, with dark blonde hair swept back like he'd just walked out of a cologne commercial. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, the kind that whispered wealth instead of shouting it. Even in the dim streetlight, Zoe could see the sharp line of his jaw, the intensity in his blue eyes, and the way he carried himself like the world had already agreed to his terms. He looked at her. Not through her, the way most people looked at the homeless. At her. And then he did something that made absolutely no sense. He walked toward her, crouched down a few feet away, and held out a bottle of water. Zoe stared at it like it was a grenade. "You okay?" His voice was low and smooth, with an edge that suggested he didn't ask questions he didn't care about the answers to. Zoe blinked. Her brain scrambled for words. "Sir, if you're here to repossess my cardboard, just know I don't have the receipt." Behind him someone snorted, a laugh cut short. Zoe's eyes flicked past the man in the suit. 2 other men stood by the SUV. One was black, built like he bench-pressed small cars for fun, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. The other was Latino, younger, with sharp features and the kind of smile that looked like trouble on vacation. The man in the suit, the one crouching in front of her like this was normal, didn't smile but his mouth twitched. Almost. "I'm not here to take anything," he said. "I wanted to make sure you were all right." "That's suspicious," Zoe replied, pulling her knees up. "People don't check on folks at night unless they want money, a kidney, or directions." This time, the twitch became an actual movement. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're not entirely wrong." He was still holding the water bottle. Zoe looked at it, then at him, then at the two men by the car who were definitely not bodyguards for anyone who meant well. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. The man studied her for a long moment. His eyes moved from her face to her neck, specifically, to the pendant resting against her collarbone. Something shifted in his expression. His jaw tightened. His eyes darkened. He looked like he'd just found something he'd been searching for. And Zoe suddenly felt very, very afraid. "Zoe Carter?" he asked. Every muscle in her body locked. "How do you know my name?" The words came out sharper than she intended, edged with panic. He didn't answer. Instead, he glanced back at the two men. The one with the scar, the big one, nodded slightly. Zoe's pulse hammered. She started to stand, but her legs shook. "Wait, hold up. Are you stalking me? Because my life is not stalkable. I'm literally the opposite of interesting. I clean houses. I sleep on cardboard. My last exciting moment was finding a $20 bill in a couch cushion, and that was 8 months ago." The man rose to his full height, and suddenly Zoe felt very small. But he didn't move closer. He just looked at her with an expression that might have been concern if concern wore a $1,500 suit. "Zoe," he said quietly, "I need you to come with me." "Absolutely not." She finally managed to stand, clutching her purse like a shield. "Sir, I don't enter cars with strangers. That's how people end up on missing posters with outdated hairstyles." The Latino man by the car stepped forward. "Lady, someone tried to kill you last night." The world tilted. Zoe grabbed the wall behind her. "What?" The big man, the one with the scar, spoke for the first time. His voice was deep and Brooklyn-bred. "That fire that destroyed the rooming house you were staying in? It wasn't an accident." Zoe's stomach dropped through the pavement. She thought about the fire. She'd been at work, scrubbing someone's kitchen floor for $10 an hour, when she got the call. By the time she arrived, the whole building was ash and sirens. The fire chief said it was faulty wiring. Old building. Tragedy, but not uncommon. "That's not," Zoe started, but the words died. Because now that she thought about it, the fire had felt wrong. Too fast. Too complete. And Mrs. Ang from the second floor had said she smelled gasoline before the smoke started. Zoe had thought she was confused. But what if she wasn't? The man in the suit extended his hand toward her. Not to grab, just offering. "You're not safe out here, Zoe. Come with me. I can protect you." "Protect me from what?" Her voice cracked. "I don't even know who you are. My name is Dominic Romano." He said it like it should mean something. It didn't. Zoe shook her head. "That's supposed to make me feel better? I don't know you. I don't know why you know my name. I don't know why you think I'm in danger. And I definitely don't know why you think I should get in a car with 3 strange men in the middle of the night." Dominic's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Respect, maybe. You're right to be cautious. But if I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't be asking permission." It was the kind of statement that should have terrified her. Instead, weirdly, it calmed her. Because he was right. If this were a kidnapping, it was the politest one in history. Zoe looked at the water bottle still in his hand. Then at the SUV. Then at the street around her. Dark. Empty. Cold. She thought about the fire. About waking up on this same corner for 3 nights, exposed and alone. About the fact that she had $17 and nowhere to go. And about the way Dominic Romano was looking at her pendant like it was a treasure map. Every instinct screamed no. But a quieter voice, the one that sounded like her mother, whispered, "What do you have to lose?" Zoe took a shaky breath. "Fine," she whispered. Dominic's shoulders relaxed slightly. He nodded to the 2 men, and the big one opened the SUV's back door. Zoe walked toward it on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. As she climbed inside, the leather seat swallowed her like a luxury she'd forgotten existed. The interior smelled like expensive cologne and a new car. Dominic slid in beside her. The door closed with a solid thunk that sounded like a decision being locked in. The Latino man took the driver's seat. The big one rode shotgun. As the SUV pulled away from the curb, Zoe pressed her face to the window and watched her cardboard bed disappear into the Brooklyn night. She had no idea she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. That her life had split into before and after. That the man sitting beside her, silent, intense, dangerous, was about to become the only thing standing between her and a truth that had been hunting her since the day she was born. The only thing Zoe knew for sure was this: nothing would ever be the same. The drive through Brooklyn should have felt familiar. Zoe had lived here her whole life, but from inside the SUV, the borough looked like a different planet. Streets she'd walked 1,000 times blurred past the tinted windows like scenes from someone else's memory. Nobody spoke. The Latino man drove with the kind of casual precision that suggested he'd done this route 100 times. The big man in the passenger seat kept his eyes on the side mirror, watching for something Zoe didn't want to imagine. And Dominic Romano sat beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something woody and expensive, but far enough that she didn't feel crowded. He stared straight ahead, jaw tight, one hand resting on his knee. Zoe clutched her purse and tried to remember how to breathe like a normal person. After what felt like hours but was probably 10 minutes, she couldn't take the silence anymore. "So," she said, her voice too loud in the quiet, "are you guys like private security or something?" The driver snorted. The passenger said nothing. Dominic turned his head slightly. "Something like that. That's vague." "It's accurate." Zoe frowned. "And you just drive around Brooklyn at night looking for homeless women to rescue?" "No," Dominic said. "Just you." The words landed heavier than they should have. Zoe's fingers tightened around her purse. "Why? What's so special about me?" "I already told you. I'm nobody. I clean houses." "Well, I used to clean houses before Mrs. Patterson fired me because I made her uncomfortable." Apparently, existing while poor is uncomfortable. The driver muttered something in Spanish that sounded like agreement. Dominic's gaze dropped to her neck again. "To the pendant. That necklace. Where did you get it?" Zoe's hand flew to the half-moon instinctively, covering it. "My mother gave it to me before she died." "Why? Do you know what it means?" "It means my mom loved me," Zoe said, sharper than she intended. "That's all I need to know." Dominic studied her for a long moment, and Zoe got the uncomfortable feeling he was seeing past her words into something she didn't even know was there. "Your mother," he said carefully. "What was her name?" "Naomi. Naomi Carter." Zoe's throat tightened the way it always did when she talked about her. "She died when I was 6. Cancer, they said. But we couldn't afford treatment, so I don't really know. She just got sicker and sicker until one day she didn't wake up." Something shifted in Dominic's expression. Not pity. Zoe had seen enough pity to recognize it, but something deeper. Sadness, maybe. Or recognition. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. And the weird thing was, he sounded like he meant it. The SUV turned onto a tree-lined street that Zoe definitely didn't recognize. The buildings here were different. Older, elegant, the kind with actual yards and gates. This wasn't Brooklyn anymore. This was money. "Where are we?" she asked. "Park Slope," the driver said. Zoe's eyebrows shot up. Park Slope. Where brownstones sold for millions and people named their kids things like quinoa and legacy. The SUV slowed in front of a massive 3-story brownstone that looked like it had been carved from old money and polished with new. Warm light glowed from tall windows. A wrought iron fence wrapped around a small but immaculate front garden. Zoe's mouth fell open. "You live here?" she whispered. "I do," Dominic said. The driver, whose name Zoe still didn't know, parked in a private driveway beside the house. The passenger got out first, scanned the street like he was expecting ninjas, then nodded. Dominic opened his door and looked back at Zoe. "Come on." Zoe didn't move. "Sir, I can't go in there." "Why not?" "Because places like that don't let people like me inside. There's probably a no poor people sensor that'll go off the second I cross the threshold." The corner of Dominic's mouth twitched again. That almost smile. "There's not. You don't know that." "Zoe." He said her name like it was a complete sentence. Gentle but firm. "Come inside." She wanted to argue. Wanted to demand answers, explanations, and a written contract promising she wasn't about to be trafficked or harvested for organs. But the truth was, she was exhausted. Bone-tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. So she climbed out of the SUV and followed Dominic Romano up the stone steps to his front door. The inside of the brownstone looked like something from a magazine Zoe would never be able to afford. Hardwood floors gleamed under soft lighting. A chandelier hung in the entryway like a constellation someone had lassoed and brought indoors. Artwork, actual paintings, not posters, lined the walls. Zoe stood frozen in the doorway, terrified to step on anything. "You can come in," Dominic said, watching her. "I'm scared to breathe wrong," Zoe admitted. The big man, the passenger, brushed past her, carrying what looked like a tablet. "Don't worry. The floors are Italian marble. Your breath can't hurt them." "That's not comforting," Zoe called after him. Dominic shook his head and gestured deeper into the house. "This way." Zoe followed, her worn sandals squeaking slightly on the pristine floor. She winced at every sound. They passed through a living room that could have fit her entire rooming house, a dining room with a table long enough to seat 12, and a hallway lined with black and white photographs of people Zoe didn't recognize. Finally, they stopped in what appeared to be a study. Dark wood bookshelves lined the walls, packed with leather-bound volumes. A massive desk dominated one side of the room. A fireplace crackled on the other side, filling the space with warmth Zoe hadn't felt in days. Dominic gestured to a chair. "Sit." Zoe sat. The chair was so comfortable that she almost cried. Dominic moved to a small bar cart and poured 2 glasses of what looked like whiskey. He offered one to Zoe. She stared at it. "I don't drink. You might want to start." "That's ominous." He set the glass on the table beside her anyway and took a seat across from her, sipping his own drink. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Zoe broke first. "Okay. I'm here. I'm sitting in your terrifyingly expensive house. Now tell me what's going on. Why do you think someone tried to kill me? And how do you know my name?" Dominic set his glass down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. 3 weeks ago, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a file, old and yellowed like it had been hidden for years. It contained information about let's call it a business dispute from 20 years ago. "What kind of business?" Dominic's jaw tightened. "The kind people kill over." Zoe's stomach flipped. "The file mentioned a woman," Dominic continued. "Naomi Carter. Your mother. She was connected to people who had something very valuable. When she died, that value didn't disappear. It passed on." "To whom?" Dominic's eyes locked on hers. "To you." Zoe laughed. It came out high and sharp, edged with hysteria. "Me?" "Sir, the most valuable thing I own is this pendant, and it's fake silver. I checked. I tried to pawn it once when I was 17 and desperate, and the guy laughed at me." "It's not about the pendant's material worth," Dominic said quietly. "It's about what it represents." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small photograph. He handed it to Zoe. She took it with trembling fingers. The photo was old and creased, and the colors had faded. It showed 2 men standing in front of what looked like a warehouse. One was older, gray-haired, with sharp Italian features and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The other was younger, black, with kind eyes and a cautious expression. And around the younger man's neck was a pendant. A broken half-moon. Just like Zoe's. Her breath caught. "The older man," Dominic said, his voice rough, "was my father. Giovanni Romano. He died 15 years ago. Murdered." Zoe's eyes snapped up. "I'm sorry." Dominic nodded, but his expression didn't change. The younger man was Marcus Webb. He worked with my father. Trusted him. And according to the file I received, Marcus Webb was married to Naomi Carter. The room spun. Zoe looked back at the photo, at the man with her pendant, and her vision blurred. That's my father? I believe so. I never knew him." The words came out broken. "My mom never talked about him. I asked once when I was little, and she just cried. So I stopped asking." Dominic's expression softened. "Marcus Webb disappeared the same year your mother died. Nobody was ever found. Most people assumed he'd run. But the file suggests otherwise." "Suggests what?" "That he was killed. Just like my father." Dominic stood and walked to the fireplace, his back to her. "And whoever killed them is still out there. Still cleaning up loose ends." "Loose ends," Zoe repeated slowly. Like me. Like you. The weight of it crushed down on her chest. Zoe set the photograph on the table with shaking hands. I don't understand. Why now? Why, after 20 years, would someone suddenly come after me? Dominic turned to face her. Because someone's looking for what your parents hid. And they think you know where it is. But I don't. Zoe's voice cracked. I don't know anything. I've spent my whole life just trying to survive. I don't have secrets. I don't have a hidden treasure or whatever you think. Zoe. Dominic crossed the room and crouched in front of her chair, the same way he had on the street. His eyes were intense but not unkind. I don't think you're lying. I think you don't know. But that doesn't matter to the people hunting you. They'll tear you apart trying to find answers you don't have. Tears burned behind Zoe's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. So what am I supposed to do? You stay here, Dominic said. With me. Under my protection. And we figure this out together. Why would you help me? The question hung between them. Dominic held her gaze. Because finding out what happened to your parents might tell me what happened to my father. Because you're innocent in this, and I don't let innocent people die. He paused. And because it's the right thing to do. Zoe wanted to argue. Wanted to run. Wanted to wake up on her cardboard bed and discover this was all some fever dream brought on by hunger and cold. But the photo on the table was real. The fire was real. And the fear crawling up her spine was very, very real. Okay, she whispered. Dominic nodded and stood. Diego will show you to a guest room. You can shower and sleep. We'll talk more in the morning. As if summoned, the Latino man from the car appeared in the doorway. Diego, apparently. This way, Miss Carter, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Zoe stood on shaky legs and followed him out of the study, leaving Dominic alone by the fire. She didn't look back. If she had, she would have seen him pull out his phone and dial a number, his expression hard as stone. And she would have heard him say, Mason, we have a problem. And it's bigger than we thought. The guest room was nicer than any place Zoe had ever lived. Hell, it was nicer than any place she'd ever seen. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, dressed in crisp white linens that looked like they'd never known the indignity of being slept on. Tall windows overlooked the garden below, framed by curtains that probably cost more than Zoe made in a year. A door on the left led to a bathroom with marble counters and a shower that had more jets than a small airport. Diego had shown her in, pointed out where everything was, and left with a simple, "Lock the door if it makes you feel safer." It did. Zoe locked it the second he was gone. Then she stood in the middle of the room, clutching her ratty purse, and tried to remember how to be a person who existed in spaces like this. She couldn't. Instead, she walked slowly to the bed and sat on the edge, half expecting alarms to go off. When nothing happened, she ran her hand over the comforter. Soft. Impossibly soft. The kind of soft that rich people probably didn't even notice because they'd never known anything else. Zoe had slept on floors, couches, cardboard, and a bus station bench once when she was 18 and desperate. Soft was a luxury she'd forgotten existed. She kicked off her duct-taped sandals and let her feet sink into the plush carpet. Then, finally, she let herself cry. Not loud, gasping sobs. Zoe had learned years ago how to cry quietly, how to muffle grief so it didn't bother anyone. Just silent tears that slid down her cheeks and dripped onto her worn jeans. She cried for her mother, dead 20 years but suddenly feeling present in a way she hadn't since Zoe was 6. She cried for the father she'd never known, the man in the photograph with kind eyes and her pendant around his neck. She cried for the life she'd been living. Hard, exhausting, lonely, and for the life she'd apparently inherited without knowing. Dangerous, complicated, deadly. And she cried because she was so tired. When the tears finally stopped, Zoe wiped her face with the back of her hand and stood. She caught sight of herself in the mirror above the dresser and winced. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who'd been sleeping on the streets. Her hair, thick, dark, and usually her one point of pride, was pulled back in a messy bun that had given up on life. Her clothes were clean but faded, worn thin from too many washes in laundromats where the machines ate quarters and gave nothing back. Her face was drawn, with shadows under her eyes deep enough to hide in. She looked haunted. Maybe because she was. Zoe turned away from the mirror and walked into the bathroom. She stood under the shower for 20 minutes, letting water that was actually hot, consistently reliably hot, wash away 3 days of street grime. The soap smelled like lavender. The shampoo made her hair feel like something worth having again. When she finally got out, she wrapped herself in a towel so fluffy it felt illegal and realized she had a problem. She had no other clothes. Everything she'd owned had burned in the fire. She'd been wearing the same outfit for 3 days. Zoe stood in the bathroom, dripping on the expensive tile, and wondered if she was supposed to put her dirty clothes back on or walk out in a towel and ask Dominic Romano, terrifying, possible mafia boss, if he had spare women's clothing lying around. Before she could decide, she heard a soft knock on the bedroom door. Zoe froze. "Miss Carter?" A woman's voice. Older. Warm. "It's Pearl. I've got some things for you, honey. I'm going to leave them outside the door." Zoe waited until she heard footsteps retreat, then cracked the bedroom door open. Sitting in the hallway was a neat stack: sweatpants, a soft t-shirt, undergarments still in packaging, and a pair of slippers. Zoe grabbed them and shut the door quickly, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Someone had thought about her needs. Someone had cared enough to help. It was such a small thing. Such a normal thing. But Zoe couldn't remember the last time anyone had done something kind for her without expecting anything in return. She dressed quickly, the clothes fit reasonably well if a little big, and climbed into the massive bed. She meant to stay awake, to think through everything that had happened, and to make a plan. But the moment her head hit the pillow, exhaustion dragged her down like an anchor, and she was gone. Zoe woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize, in a bed that felt like a cloud, in a room that definitely wasn't a Brooklyn sidewalk. For one blissful second, she forgot everything. Then it all came crashing back. The fire. The SUV. Dominic Romano. The photograph. Her father. The danger. Zoe sat up, heart racing. A glance at the clock on the nightstand told her it was 9:47 a.m. She'd slept for almost 10 hours. The longest she'd slept in months. Her stomach growled, loud and insistent. Zoe climbed out of bed, slipped on the 2 big slippers, and unlocked the door. The hallway was quiet, sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked the tree-lined street. Everything looked even more expensive in daylight. She followed the hallway back toward the stairs, moving quietly, half expecting someone to jump out and tell her this was all a mistake, that she needed to leave. But instead, she followed the smell of coffee and bacon down to the first floor and into a kitchen that looked like it belonged on a cooking show. A woman stood at the stove, black, probably in her late 60s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun and an apron that said, "I'm not bossy, I'm the boss." She hummed while she worked, moving with the easy efficiency of someone who'd cooked in this kitchen 1,000 times. She turned when Zoe entered and smiled, warm and genuine. "Well, good morning, honey," she said. "I was wondering when you'd wake up. I'm Pearl. I cook, clean, and keep this house from falling into chaos." "You must be Zoe." Zoe nodded, suddenly shy. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you. For the clothes last night." Pearl waved a hand. "Oh, that's nothing. Can't have you walking around in dirty clothes. You sit down now. Breakfast is almost ready. I don't want to be any trouble." "Trouble?" Pearl laughed, a rich sound that filled the kitchen. "Honey, feeding people is what I do. Now sit before I get offended." Zoe sat at the kitchen island, perched on a stool like a bird ready to fly away. Pearl set a plate in front of her. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and fresh fruit. More food than Zoe usually ate in 2 days. I can't pay for this," Zoe said quietly. Pearl's expression softened. "Nobody's asking you to. You're a guest in this house. That means you eat, you rest, and you let people take care of you for once. Understood?" Zoe's throat tightened. She nodded. "Good." Pearl poured herself a cup of coffee. "Now eat. You're too skinny. I can tell you've been skipping meals." Zoe wanted to argue that she hadn't been skipping meals by choice, but her mouth was already full of eggs, and they were the best eggs she'd ever tasted. Pearl watched her with the kind of satisfaction that only comes from feeding someone who's truly hungry. Then she leaned against the counter and said, "So, Dominic brought you here. It wasn't a question." Zoe swallowed. "Yes, ma'am. He tells you why?" "Sort of. It's complicated. It always is with him." Pearl shook her head. That boy carries the weight of the world on his shoulders and won't let anyone help him lift it. Been that way since his father died. Zoe looked up. You knew his father? Giovanni? Oh yes. I worked for him first, before Dominic. Good man, but troubled. This life. Pearl gestured vaguely, encompassing the house, the wealth, and whatever else Zoe didn't understand yet. This life doesn't let you rest. Doesn't let you trust. Giovanni learned that the hard way. How did he die? Zoe asked, then immediately regretted it. I'm sorry. That's none of my business. He was shot, Pearl said simply. 15 years ago. Dominic was only 22. Found his father bleeding out in his own office. Her eyes went distant. Changed him. Made him hard. Careful. He doesn't let many people close anymore. Zoe thought about the way Dominic had looked at her last night. Intense but not cruel, protective but not possessive. He seems, I don't know, complicated. Pearl smiled. That's a kind way to put it. Just. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Just don't fall for him, honey. Zoe nearly choked on her coffee. What? I'm not, that's not. I've seen that look before, Pearl said knowingly. Girl meets a dangerous man who shows her kindness when she needs it most. Tale as old as time. But Dominic's world is dangerous. People around him get hurt. I don't want to see that happen to you. I'm not going to fall for anyone, Zoe said firmly. I'm just trying to stay alive. Pearl nodded, but her expression said she didn't quite believe it. Before Zoe could protest further, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Heavy. Deliberate. Dominic appeared in the kitchen doorway. And Zoe's stupid heart did a thing she absolutely did not approve of. He'd changed from last night's suit into dark jeans and a charcoal Henley that fit him in a way that should have been illegal. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd just showered. He looked less like a businessman and more like... Zoe forced herself to look away and focus very hard on her bacon. Good morning, Dominic said, his voice still rough with something that might have been sleep. Morning, baby, Pearl said, already pouring him coffee. Your guest is finally awake. I can see that. Dominic's eyes found Zoe. How'd you sleep? Too well, Zoe admitted. That bed is... It's nicer than my entire life. Something flickered across Dominic's face. You'll be staying in it for a while. We need to talk. When you're done eating, meet me in my office. It wasn't a question. He took his coffee and left. Pearl watched him go, then looked at Zoe. Don't fall for him, she repeated. I won't, Zoe said. But even she could hear the lie in her voice. 20 minutes later, Zoe stood outside Dominic's office, stomach full but nerves jangling. She knocked softly on the door. Come in. She entered to find Dominic behind his desk, papers spread in front of him. The big man from last night. Mason, she remembered Dominic calling him, stood by the window. Diego leaned against the bookshelf, arms crossed. All three men looked at her. Zoe suddenly felt very small. Sit, Dominic said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Zoe sat. Dominic pushed a folder toward her. I need you to look at something. Zoe opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were photographs. Old ones, like the picture from last night. She saw her father again, Marcus Webb, in several shots. Saw her mother in two, young and beautiful and smiling in a way Zoe barely remembered. And she saw other people. Men in suits. Women in expensive clothes. Scenes that looked like parties, business meetings, and gatherings. One photo made her stop. It showed her mother and father standing with a group of people in front of a building. A warehouse, maybe. Her mother was pregnant. Pregnant with Zoe. When was this taken? She whispered. 21 years ago, Dominic said. 6 months before you were born. Zoe stared at her mother's face, at the slight swell of her belly, and at the way her father's hand rested protectively on her shoulder. The building behind them, Dominic continued, was a storage facility in Red Hook. It burned down the same night my father was killed. Zoe looked up. You think they're connected? I know they are. Dominic pulled out another photo. This one showed the warehouse in flames. My father died trying to protect whatever was inside that building. Your parents disappeared the same night. And according to the file I received, there was something in that warehouse worth millions. Something that was never recovered. What was it? We don't know, Mason spoke for the first time, his deep voice filling the room. The fire destroyed everything. Or so we thought. Diego pushed off the bookshelf. But 3 weeks ago, someone started asking questions. Poking around in old records. Looking for information about that night. About your parents. About you. Zoe's blood ran cold. Who? We don't know that either, Dominic said, frustration edging his voice. But whoever they are, they're dangerous. They burned down your rooming house. They're watching, waiting for you to lead them to whatever they think you have. But I don't have anything. Zoe's voice rose. I've told you, I don't know about any of this. I was 6 when my mother died. I don't remember warehouses or secrets or millions of dollars. I remember being hungry and scared and alone. The room went quiet. Dominic's expression softened. I believe you, Zoe. But that doesn't change the fact that someone thinks you're the key to finding what your parents hid. And until we figure out what that is and who's looking for it, you're not safe. Zoe slumped in her chair, the weight of it crushing. So what do I do? You stay here, Dominic said. You let us protect you. And you help us figure this out. How? I don't know anything useful. You knew your mother, Dominic said quietly. Did she ever tell you stories? Talk about places she'd been? Mention people's names. Zoe thought back, trying to pull memories from 20 years of fog. She used to sing to me. This lullaby, I think. I don't remember the words. Anything else? Zoe closed her eyes, reaching for fragments. She used to tell me I was special. That I was going to do great things. That I had to be brave, even when things were hard. Her voice cracked. She said that a lot. In the hospital before she died. Be brave, baby. Be strong. Remember what I told you. Remember what? Diego asked. I don't know. I was 6. I thought she just meant, like, be a good person or whatever. Zoe opened her eyes, and they were wet. I didn't know she was trying to tell me something important. Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then he stood and walked around the desk, perching on the edge of it in front of her. Close, but not threatening. We'll figure it out, he said. I promise. Why? Zoe looked up at him. Why do you care? You don't know me. Dominic's jaw tightened. Because 20 years ago, someone took my father from me. And I think that someone took your parents from you. I want justice, Zoe. And you deserve answers. The way he said it, firm, certain, like he was making a vow, made something in Zoe's chest ache. Okay, she whispered. Mason cleared his throat. Boss, we should talk about security. If someone's watching. I know, Dominic said, his eyes still on Zoe. We'll increase patrols. No one goes in or out without clearance. And Zoe doesn't leave the house until we know more. I'm a prisoner? Zoe asked. You're protected, Dominic corrected. Feels like the same thing. It's not. Dominic's voice softened. I'm not keeping you here against your will, Zoe. If you want to leave, you can. But I'm asking you to stay. To trust me. Zoe looked at him, really looked at him. At the intensity in his blue eyes, the set of his jaw, and the way he held himself, like he was ready to fight the world if necessary. She thought about the streets. About sleeping on cardboard. About being alone with a target on her back she didn't even know existed. And she thought about the way Dominic had crouched beside her last night, offering water instead of judgment. I'll stay, she said. Dominic nodded. Good. But I need to do something. I can't just sit around in that beautiful room doing nothing while you people risk your lives for me. Let me help. I can clean, cook, organize. You're not the maid, Zoe, Dominic said firmly. I know. But I need to feel useful. Please. Dominic considered, then looked at Mason and Diego. Some silent communication passed between them. Fine, Dominic said. Help Pearl in the kitchen if you want. But you stay inside. You stay alert. And if anything feels wrong, you come find me immediately. Understood. Understood. Good. Dominic stood and walked back behind his desk. Mason, Diego, let's go over the security protocols. Zoe, you're dismissed. Zoe stood, legs shaky, and walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the handle. Dominic. He looked up. Thank you, she said quietly. For believing me. For helping me. For everything. His expression softened in a way that made him look younger, less dangerous. You don't have to thank me, Zoe. But she wanted to. Because for the first time in as long as she could remember, Zoe Carter didn't feel alone. 3 days passed in a strange kind of limbo. Zoe spent her mornings helping Pearl in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, learning how to make homemade pasta, and listening to stories about Dominic's childhood that Pearl probably wasn't supposed to share but did anyway. He used to be sweet, Pearl said one morning while they kneaded dough. Softer. Would bring me flowers from the garden and tell me jokes he'd heard at school. But after Giovanni died. She shook her head. He locked that part of himself away. Built walls so high nobody could climb them. Zoe thought about those walls. She'd seen glimpses of what was behind them. Moments when Dominic's expression softened, when his voice lost its edge. But mostly, he stayed distant. He was around, always. Working in his office, taking calls in Italian that Zoe didn't understand, meeting with Mason and Diego and other men who came and went with serious faces and careful eyes. Sometimes Zoe would catch him watching her. Not in a creepy way. More like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. Like she was a mystery he was determined to solve. It should have made her uncomfortable. Instead, it made her nervous in a completely different way. The kind of nervousness that made her hyper-aware of what she was wearing, how her hair looked, and whether she had food in her teeth. The kind of nervousness Pearl had warned her about. On the 4th morning, Zoe woke to voices outside her door. Angry voices. She climbed out of bed and pressed her ear to the door. Can't keep her locked up like a prisoner, Dom. Mason's voice was rough with frustration. She's going stir-crazy in there. She's safe in there. Dominic's voice. Harder. That's what matters. She's a person, not a package to protect. I'm aware. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you're treating her like evidence instead of. Instead of what? Dominic's voice went dangerously quiet. A pause. Then Mason. Nothing. Forget it. Footsteps retreated. Zoe stepped back from the door, heart pounding. She shouldn't have eavesdropped. But she was glad she did, because Mason was right. She was going stir-crazy. 4 days in the most beautiful house she'd ever seen, and Zoe felt like she was suffocating. She couldn't go outside. Couldn't walk to the corner store for air. Couldn't even look out a window without Mason or Diego reminding her to stay away from sightlines. She was safe. But she wasn't free. And Zoe had spent too many years struggling for scraps of freedom to give it up easily, even for good reasons. She got dressed in clothes Pearl had bought for her, real clothes that actually fit, and went downstairs. The house was quiet except for the sound of Pearl humming in the kitchen. Zoe found Dominic in his office, as usual. The door was open. He sat behind his desk, reading something on his laptop, a cup of coffee cooling beside him. She knocked on the doorframe. He looked up, and something in his expression shifted when he saw her. Softened, maybe. Morning. Morning. Zoe stepped inside. Can we talk? Of course. He closed the laptop and gave her his full attention. Zoe sat in the chair across from him, the same chair she'd sat in 3 times now. It was starting to feel like hers. I need to get out of this house. Dominic's expression went carefully blank. Zoe. Just for a little while, she said quickly. Just a walk. Some air. I'm going crazy in here. Dominic. I know you're trying to protect me, and I'm grateful, but I can't breathe. It's not safe. Then come with me, Zoe said. You and Mason and Diego and whoever else. Bring an army if you need to. But please. I need to feel human again. Dominic studied her for a long moment. Zoe could see him weighing options, calculating risks, and building arguments. Then he sighed. 1 hour. Prospect Park. And you don't leave my sight. Relief flooded through her. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Dominic said, standing. Mason's going to have an aneurysm. Mason did, in fact, nearly have an aneurysm. This is a terrible idea, he said for the fourth time as they loaded into the SUV. Boss, if something happens, then we handle it, Dominic said calmly. He sat beside Zoe in the back seat, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. We'll be careful. Diego drove, Mason rode shotgun, and two other cars, filled with men Zoe didn't recognize, followed behind them. This feels like a presidential motorcade, Zoe muttered. Dominic's mouth twitched. You're important cargo. I'm a former maid who slept on cardboard 4 days ago. You're more than that. The way he said it, simple, certain, made Zoe's chest do something complicated. Prospect Park was beautiful. Trees wore their autumn colors like expensive jewelry. Gold, orange, and deep red. Families walked dogs, joggers passed by in expensive sneakers, and children played on the grass. Normal people doing normal things. Zoe had forgotten what normal looked like. They walked along a paved path, Dominic on one side of her, Mason on the other. Diego and the other men spread out, maintaining a perimeter Zoe tried not to think about. This is nice, Zoe said after a few minutes of silence. Thank you for letting me do this. You don't have to keep thanking me, Dominic said. Yes, I do. You didn't have to help me. You could have left me on that street. No, Dominic said quietly. I couldn't have. Zoe glanced at him. Why not? He was quiet for a moment, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the park even as he walked. Because I know what it's like to lose people you love to violence you don't understand. To have your whole world ripped apart and no one to help you make sense of it. He looked at her. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Especially not someone innocent. You were innocent too, Zoe said softly. When your father died. You didn't deserve that. Something flickered across Dominic's face. Pain maybe. Or old grief. No. But I learned to live with it. Did you? Zoe asked. Or did you just build walls around it? Dominic stopped walking. Turned to face her fully. Who told you that? Pearl talks when she cooks. Of course she does. But there was affection in his voice, not anger. They stood there on the path, people passing around them, autumn leaves drifting down like slow-motion confetti. I had walls too, Zoe said. After my mom died. After years of being invisible, being treated like I didn't matter because I was poor. You build walls to protect yourself from a world that doesn't care if you survive. And did they work? Dominic asked. The walls. Zoe thought about it. About cold nights on the street. About employers who underpaid and overworked her. About the loneliness that had become so constant, she'd stopped noticing it. No, she admitted. They just made me lonelier. Dominic held her gaze. Yeah, they do that. Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding, maybe. Recognition. Two people who'd survived by building armor suddenly realized how heavy it was. Mason cleared his throat. Boss. We should keep moving. The spell broke. They walked on. They'd been in the park for maybe 30 minutes when Zoe noticed the man. He was standing by a tree about 50 feet away, watching them. White guy, medium build, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. Zoe's steps faltered. What is it? Dominic asked immediately, his hand going to her elbow. That man, Zoe whispered. By the oak tree. He's staring at us. Dominic didn't turn his head, but his entire body tensed. Mason. I see him, Mason said quietly. He spoke into a small radio on his wrist. Diego, we've got eyes. Northeast by the oak. The man must have realized he'd been spotted because he turned and started walking away. Fast. Stay with Zoe, Dominic said, and before anyone could respond, he was moving. Dominic, wait. Zoe started, but Mason grabbed her arm. He knows what he's doing, Mason said. Zoe watched as Dominic closed the distance between himself and the man with frightening speed. Diego appeared from somewhere, cutting off the man's escape route. The man tried to run. He didn't get far. Dominic caught him, spun him around, and slammed him against a tree hard enough that Zoe heard the impact from where she stood. She couldn't hear what Dominic said, but she saw his mouth moving, saw the way he held the man by the jacket, and saw the absolute fury in his body language. The man shook his head frantically, hands up in surrender. Diego searched him and pulled something from his pocket. A phone, maybe. Mason spoke into his radio. Clear the area. Now. Within seconds, the other men had created a perimeter, gently but firmly encouraging nearby parkgoers to move along. What's happening? Zoe asked, her heart hammering. We're finding out, Mason said grimly. After what felt like forever, Dominic released the man and walked back toward them, his expression thunderous. Diego followed, holding a phone. Who was he? Zoe asked when Dominic reached them. A photographer, Dominic said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Freelance. Someone hired him to follow you and take pictures. Zoe's blood went cold. Who? He doesn't know. The job came through an encrypted app. Cash payment. No names. Dominic's jaw clenched. But whoever it is, they know you're with me now. They're watching. Mason swore under his breath. We need to get her back to the house. No, Zoe said suddenly. Everyone looked at her. No. Dominic repeated. I'm not running, Zoe said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. I'm not hiding anymore. I've spent my whole life being invisible, being pushed around, and being treated like I don't matter. People took my mother from me. Took my father. Burned down what little I had left. And now they're hunting me for something I don't even understand. Her voice rose, fueled by 4 days of fear and frustration and rage she hadn't known she was holding. I want to know who they are. I want to know why they think they have the right to destroy my life. And I want them to pay. Silence. Then Dominic smiled. Actually smiled, wide and real, in a way that transformed his entire face. There she is, he said softly. There, who is it? The fighter. I knew you had it in you. Zoe's anger faltered, replaced by something warmer. I don't feel like a fighter. You are, Dominic said. You've survived things that would have broken most people. You're stronger than you know. He looked at Mason and Diego. She's right. We're done hiding. It's time to go on offense. Mason's eyes widened. Boss. They want a war? Dominic's voice went hard as steel. They've got one. Back at the house, Dominic called a meeting. The study was filled with people Zoe hadn't met yet. Men in suits, a few women with sharp eyes and sharper expressions. They stood around the room while Dominic sat behind his desk, Zoe in the chair beside him. Everyone, this is Zoe Carter, Dominic said. She's under my protection, which means she's under the Romano family's protection. Anyone who threatens her answers to me. Clear. Murmurs of agreement. Dominic nodded to Diego, who pulled up something on a tablet and projected it onto the wall. Photos appeared. Surveillance shots, documents, and maps. 3 weeks ago, Dominic began. Someone started asking questions about an incident from 20 years ago. The Red Hook warehouse fire. My father's death. And Zoe's parents. He stood and walked to the projection. We now know this person or group is actively tracking Zoe. They burned down her residence. They hired surveillance. They're getting bolder, which means they're getting desperate. Desperate for what? One of the women asked. Whatever Zoe's parents hid before they died, Dominic said. Something valuable enough to kill for then, and kill for now. He clicked to the next slide. It showed a series of financial transactions, numbers Zoe didn't understand. I've had my team digging through old records, Dominic continued. The warehouse that burned down was owned by a shell corporation. That corporation was connected to several others, all of them linked to organized crime families operating in New York 20 years ago. Including ours, Mason added quietly. Dominic nodded. My father was investigating something before he died. He kept it quiet and didn't trust anyone. But according to his private notes, which I found hidden in his safe years after his death, he believed someone in our own organization was dirty. Stealing. Planning something big. He thought it was an inside job? The woman asked. Yes. And I think Marcus Webb, Zoe's father, was helping him investigate. That's why they were killed. Zoe's hands clenched in her lap. So my parents died because they knew too much? I think they died protecting something, Dominic said gently. Something they hid before anyone could find it. But what? Zoe asked, frustration bleeding through. What could be worth this much trouble? That's what we need to figure out, Dominic said. He turned back to the room. I want every piece of information about that warehouse. Every transaction, every person who had access, every shipment that went through it. I want to know what my father and Marcus Webb were protecting. The room erupted into quiet activity as people pulled out phones and tablets, making calls and sending messages. Dominic sat back down beside Zoe. You okay? She shook her head. No. But I will be. Once we figure this out. We will, Dominic said with certainty. Zoe looked at him. At this man who'd pulled her off the streets and into a world she didn't understand. Who'd promised to protect her and seemed determined to keep that promise, no matter the cost. Why are you really doing this? She asked quietly. It can't just be about your father. You're risking everything, your safety, your people, your resources, for someone you barely know. Dominic was quiet for a moment. Then he said, my father used to tell me that power meant nothing if you didn't use it to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. He said that was the difference between a leader and a tyrant. He looked at her. You needed protection, Zoe. And I had the power to give it. That's reason enough. That's not all of it, Zoe said. She didn't know how she knew, but she did. Dominic's expression shifted. Became more vulnerable. No, he admitted. It's not. Then what? He held her gaze. Because when I look at you, I see someone fighting to survive in a world that's been unfair to her from the start. Someone who's been knocked down over and over but keeps getting back up. Someone who deserves better than what she's been given. His voice dropped. And maybe helping you is a way to make up for all the times I couldn't help people who needed it. All the times I was too late, or too blind, or too caught up in my own grief to see what was right in front of me. The confession hung in the air between them. Zoe's throat tightened. You're not responsible for saving everyone, Dominic. I know, he said. But I can save you and I will. The certainty in his voice made Zoe believe him. It also made her heart do that complicated thing again. Pearl's warning echoed in her head. Don't fall for him. But Zoe was beginning to suspect it was too late. That night, Zoe couldn't sleep. She lay in the too comfortable bed, staring at the ceiling, mind racing. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the photographer in the park. Saw the fear in his eyes when Dominic caught him. Someone was watching her. Hunting her. And she still didn't know why. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and padded downstairs in her borrowed pajamas and slippers. The house was dark except for a light coming from under the study door. Zoe walked toward it and found Dominic still awake, still working, papers spread across his desk, and exhaustion written in the lines of his face. He looked up when she knocked. Can't sleep. Neither can you, apparently. Too much to do. Zoe stepped into the room. You're going to burn out. I'll rest when this is over. Dominic. Zoe, I'm fine. But he wasn't. Zoe could see it in the tension of his shoulders and the tightness around his eyes. He was carrying too much, holding too many pieces together. She walked around the desk and did something bold. Something she probably shouldn't have done. She put her hands on his shoulders. Dominic froze. What are you doing? He asked, his voice rough. Helping, Zoe said. She pressed her thumbs into the knots she could feel in his shoulders, working at the tension. Dominic let out a breath that might have been a sigh. You don't have to. Shh. Let me do this. For a moment, she thought he'd pull away. But then his shoulders dropped, just slightly, and he let her work. They stayed like that for several minutes. Quiet. The only sound was the ticking of a clock on the wall, and Dominic's breathing gradually evened out. You're good at this, he said finally. I used to do it for my mom, Zoe said softly. When she was sick. It helped with the pain. I'm sorry, Dominic said. For what you went through. For what you lost. I'm sorry for what you lost too. Dominic reached up and caught one of her hands, pulling it down to rest on his shoulder. He held it there, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. The gesture was simple. It felt like everything. Zoe, he said quietly, not looking at her. When this is over, when you're safe, what will you do? The question caught her off guard. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. You should think about it. About what you want. What kind of life do you want to build? What kind of life can I build? I have no money, no job, no prospects. You have more than you think, Dominic said. He finally turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. You're smart, strong, resilient. You could do anything. Right now, I'm just trying to stay alive. But after, Dominic pressed. After we figure this out. After you're safe. What do you want? Zoe thought about it. Really thought about it. What did she want? For so long, want had been a luxury she couldn't afford. She'd wanted a roof over her head, food in her stomach, and safety. Basic things. Survival things. But if she let herself want more. I want to matter, she said finally. I want to do something that makes a difference. I want to help people who are where I was. Invisible, struggling, forgotten. I want. She trailed off, suddenly embarrassed. What? Dominic asked gently. I want to be someone my mother would be proud of. Dominic stood, turning to face her fully. He was close now, close enough that Zoe had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. She already is, he said softly. You survived. Zoe. Against impossible odds. You kept going when most people would have given up. That takes strength most people never find. Tears pricked Zoe's eyes. I don't feel strong. You are. Dominic lifted his hand and very gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so tender it made Zoe's heart ache. Stronger than you know. They stood there, inches apart, the air between them charged with something Zoe didn't have a name for. She should step back. Should remember Pearl's warning. Should protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak of falling for a man whose world was violence and danger, and nothing she could ever truly be part of. But she didn't step back. And neither did he. Dominic, she whispered. I know, he said. I know I shouldn't. I know this is complicated. Dangerous. Everything about this situation is dangerous, Zoe said. That's why I should keep my distance. Keep this professional. Should, Zoe repeated. But are you going to? Dominic's jaw clenched. She could see the war happening behind his eyes. The battle between what he wanted and what he thought was right. Finally, he stepped back. The loss of his proximity felt like cold water. Yes, he said, his voice tight. I'm going to. Because you deserve better than someone like me. Someone whose life is built on violence and secrets. You deserve normal. Zoe. Safe. Good. What if I don't want normal? The words came out before Zoe could stop them. You should, Dominic said. Trust me. He turned back to his desk, his shoulders rigid. The dismissal was clear. Zoe stood there for another moment, her heart doing painful things in her chest. Then she whispered, Good night, Dominic. Good night, Zoe. She walked out of the study and back upstairs to her borrowed room and her borrowed life. And she tried very hard not to think about the way Dominic's hand had felt against her skin. Or the look in his eyes that said he was falling just as hard as she was. And was just as scared. The next morning, everything changed. Zoe was helping Pearl make breakfast when Diego burst into the kitchen, phone in hand, face grim. Where's the boss? He asked. Office, Pearl said. What's wrong? Diego didn't answer. He was already gone. Zoe and Pearl exchanged glances. That didn't look good, Pearl muttered. They found out why 10 minutes later when Dominic strode into the kitchen, Mason and Diego flanking him. His expression was thunderous. We got a hit, he said without preamble. One of my contacts found something in the old warehouse records. A storage manifest from the night of the fire. Zoe's pulse quickened. What was in it? According to the manifest, the warehouse was storing art. High-value pieces, allegedly in transit to a private collector. Dominic pulled out his phone and showed her a scanned document. But here's the interesting part. The manifest lists 20 pieces. But the insurance claim filed after the fire only listed 15. Someone removed 5 pieces before the fire, Mason said. Your father and mine, Zoe breathed. That's what I think, Dominic said. They discovered something was wrong, pulled some pieces for evidence, and hid them before whoever was running the operation could stop them. But where would they hide stolen art? Zoe asked. That's the question. Dominic's eyes were intense. Think, Zoe. Did your mother ever mention storage units? Safe deposit boxes? Friends who might have kept something for her. Zoe racked her brain. I was 6. I don't wait. A memory flickered. Faint like looking through fog. There was a place. She took me there once, maybe a few weeks before she died. It was in Brooklyn, I think. Red brick building. There was a man there, older, with white hair. He was nice to me and gave me a lollipop. Do you remember anything else? Dominic pressed. A name? Street? Anything? Zoe closed her eyes, reaching for the memory. The man called my mother Nay. That's what my dad called her. And there were boats. I could hear water. We must have been near the water. Mason pulled out a tablet. Brooklyn waterfront. 20 years ago. That's a lot of territory. But it's a start, Dominic said. He looked at Zoe. We're going to show you some photos. Locations. See if anything triggers a memory. For the next 2 hours, Zoe sat at Dominic's desk scrolling through images of Brooklyn waterfront properties from 2 decades ago. Warehouses, storage facilities, old factories. Nothing looked familiar. Her head started to ache. We can take a break, Dominic said, watching her rub her temples. No. I want to keep going. Zoe. They killed my parents for this, Zoe said, her voice hard. Whoever did this took everything from me. My mother, my father, and any chance at a normal life. I'm not stopping until we find them. Pride flickered across Dominic's face. All right. Keep looking. 3 photos later, Zoe gasped. That one. Stop. Mason enlarged the image. It showed an old brick building with a sign that read, Marino's Marine Supply. The building was weathered, situated right on the water with docks visible behind it. I've been there, Zoe whispered. I remember. That sign. The anchor is painted on the door. My mother held my hand, and we went inside, and the man, Marino I guess, hugged her. Told her she was doing the right thing. Dominic and Mason exchanged looks. Is the place still there? Dominic asked. Mason was already typing. According to records, yes. Still owned by Vincent Marino. Same address. Red Hook. Let's go, Dominic said, standing. Boss, if this is the place, whoever's hunting for this might be watching it, Mason warned. Then we go prepared, Dominic said. Get the team ready. We leave in 20 minutes. The drive to Red Hook was tense. Zoe sat in the back of the SUV between Dominic and Mason, heart hammering. 2 more vehicles followed, filled with Dominic's people. When we get there, Dominic said, you stay in the car until we've cleared the building. Understood. But I'm the only one who's been there before. Zoe. Dominic's voice was firm. You stay in the car. She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes told her it wouldn't work. Fine, she muttered. They pulled up to Marino's Marine Supply just after noon. The building looked older and more worn than in the photo, but it was definitely the same place. The painted anchor on the door had faded to almost nothing. Diego parked across the street. Mason spoke into his radio, coordinating with the other teams. The building looks empty, Diego observed. Or someone wants it to look empty, Mason said. Dominic pulled out a gun. Zoe hadn't even known he was carrying one, and checked it with practiced efficiency. Mason, Diego with me. Tony's team takes the back. Marco's team stays with Zoe. I don't need a whole team to babysit me, Zoe protested. Yes, Dominic said, looking at her with an intensity that stopped her breath. You do. Then he was out of the car and moving toward the building, Mason and Diego flanking him. Zoe watched through the tinted window, stomach in knots. 2 men she didn't know slid into the front seats. One of them, Marco she assumed, turned to look at her. Don't worry, Miss Carter. The boss knows what he's doing. That's not as comforting as you think it is, Zoe muttered. Dominic reached the door. Tried the handle. It opened. He disappeared inside, swallowed by darkness. Zoe counted her heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Nothing happened. 10 heartbeats. 20. Still nothing. This is taking too long, she said. They've been in there 45 seconds, Marco said calmly. It felt like hours. Then Zoe heard it. Faint, but distinct. Gunfire. No. She reached for the door handle, but Marco was faster. Miss Carter, don't. They're shooting. Dominic is in there, and someone is shooting. Which is exactly why you need to stay here, Marco said firmly. The boss would kill us if we let anything happen to you. More gunshots. Closer now. Zoe's whole body shook. Please. We have to help them. Our people are trained for this. They'll be fine. But Marco's hand had moved to his own weapon. They weren't fine. Someone was in there, and they were ready for Dominic's team. This was a trap. The thought crystallized with terrible clarity just as the back door of the SUV was yanked open. Zoe screamed. A man she'd never seen before stood there. White, middle-aged, with cold eyes and a gun pointed directly at her. Out of the car, Miss Carter, he said. Now. Marco spun, reaching for his weapon, but the stranger was faster. He fired once. Marco slumped against the steering wheel. The driver's side door opened. Another man dragged the second guard out. Zoe heard him hit the pavement. I said out, the stranger repeated. Zoe's hands shook as she climbed out of the SUV. The moment her feet hit the ground, someone grabbed her from behind, twisting her arm behind her back. Don't scream, a voice hissed in her ear. Or I'll kill everyone in that building, starting with Romano. Zoe's breath came in short gasps. What do you want? What everyone wants, the man said. What your parents stole. And you're going to tell me where it is. I don't know. You will. He started dragging her backward, toward a van that had appeared as if from nowhere. One way or another, you'll remember. And if you don't... He pressed the gun harder against her ribs. Well, then you're no use to anyone, are you? Terror flooded Zoe's system. She tried to dig her heels in, tried to resist, but he was too strong. They were going to take her. Dominic was inside, under fire, and these people were going to take her, and he wouldn't know until it was too late. No. The word echoed through Zoe's mind. She'd been powerless her whole life. Pushed around, overlooked, treated like she didn't matter. But she mattered now. Dominic had told her she was strong. Had said she was a fighter. Time to prove it. Zoe went limp, a dead weight. The man cursed as she dropped. In his moment of surprise, she drove her elbow back as hard as she could into his stomach. He grunted and his grip loosened. Zoe wrenched free and ran. Not away from the building, toward it. Dominic! She screamed. Dominic! Gunfire erupted behind her. Zoe felt something hot was past her ear. A bullet, she realized with distant horror. She kept running. The door to Marino's was still open. Zoe plunged inside, into darkness that smelled like dust and old motor oil. Dominic! Zoe! His voice came from somewhere to her left. What the hell, get down! Zoe dropped to the floor just as more gunfire exploded above her head. She covered her head with her hands, her heart trying to beat out of her chest. Then there were hands on her, strong, familiar, pulling her behind a stack of crates. Dominic! Are you insane? He hissed, his face inches from hers. I told you to stay in the car. They came for me. They shot Marco and they were taking me and I. Her voice broke. Dominic's expression transformed from anger to pure fury. They shot Marco? I think he's alive, but... Dominic cut her off by pulling out his radio. Diego, we've got men down outside. Zoe was almost taken. I need backup now. On it, boss. Diego's voice crackled back. Another burst of gunfire. Closer. How many? Zoe whispered. At least 4 inside. Now apparently more outside. Dominic checked his gun. This was a setup. Someone knew we were coming. How? I don't know. But we're about to find out. He looked at her, his blue eyes fierce in the dim light. Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say. Can you do that? Zoe nodded. Good. He touched her face, just briefly. I'm getting you out of here. Then he was moving, and Zoe followed, staying low. They made it maybe 10 feet before a man appeared from behind a shelf, gun raised. Dominic fired first. The man went down. Zoe's ears rang from the gunshot at close range, but she kept moving. They found Mason in what looked like an old office, holding his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. You're hit, Dominic said. I'm fine. Boss, there's something here. A safe. Hidden behind a false wall. I think this is what we were looking for. Dominic's eyes gleamed. Can you walk? Can I breathe? Then I can walk. More footsteps. Diego appeared, gun drawn. Buildings almost clear. 3 down, 1 to run. Marco's alive. An ambulance is coming. What the hell is she doing in here? Long story, Dominic said. Help Mason. I'm getting Zoe to safety and then coming back. The safe, Mason started. We'll still be here in 5 minutes. Dominic grabbed Zoe's hand and pulled her toward what looked like a back exit. They emerged into the cold November air, into an alley behind the building. 3 of Dominic's men had formed a perimeter. One of them, Tony, Zoe thought, jogged over. Street's clear, boss. Whoever came for her is gone. They'll be back, Dominic said grimly. Get every man we have on this location. No one gets in or out without my say-so. Tony nodded and moved away, barking orders into his phone. Dominic turned to Zoe, his hands going to her shoulders. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? I'm okay. Scared, but okay. You should be scared. You could have been killed. His voice was harsh, but his hands were gentle as they ran down her arms, checking for injuries. What were you thinking, running into an active firefight? I was thinking I'd rather die trying to fight than let them take me, Zoe said, her voice stronger than she felt. I'm tired of being a victim, Dominic. I'm tired of running and hiding and letting other people decide what happens to me. Something fierce and proud blazed in Dominic's eyes. You're going to give me a heart attack. You're the one who said I was strong. I didn't mean you should test it by getting shot at. Despite everything, the terror, the gunfire, the blood, Zoe almost smiled. But I didn't get shot. Zoe Carter, you are the most stubborn, infuriating brave. He cut himself off, jaw clenching. Brave what? She asked softly. The bravest woman I've ever met, he finished. Then, before she could process what was happening, he pulled her into his arms and held her. Just held her, his chin resting on top of her head, his heart hammering against her cheek. Zoe wrapped her arms around him and held on. I thought I'd lost you, he said quietly. When I heard your voice inside the building, and the gunfire, I thought. I'm okay, Zoe whispered. We're okay. They stood like that for a long moment, 2 people clinging to each other in the aftermath of violence, finding comfort in the simple fact of survival. Then Diego appeared in the doorway. Boss. You need to see this. Reluctantly, Dominic released Zoe, but he kept hold of her hand as they followed Diego back inside. Mason stood in the office, his wounded shoulder now bandaged. Behind him, a section of wall had been removed, revealing a safe embedded in the brick. It's old, Mason said. But the lock is intact. We need the combination. Dominic looked at Zoe. Any ideas? Zoe stared at the safe. It was gray metal, old-fashioned, with a dial combination lock. No keypad, no modern security. Just 3 numbers. I don't. She started. Then stopped. A memory surfaced. Hazy, like looking through water. Her mother's voice. Asterisk, remember the numbers. Baby. The special numbers. Can you remember? Asterisk. Zoe had thought it was a game. Her mother would say numbers, and Zoe would repeat them back. 0, 6, 12. Try 0, 6, 12, Zoe said. Dominic moved to the safe and carefully turned the dial. 0, 6, 12. The lock clicked. The safe door swung open. Inside was a leather portfolio, aged and worn. Dominic pulled it out carefully and opened it. Photographs spilled out. Documents. And something else, a small black ledger, its pages yellowed with age. Dominic opened the ledger, and his face went white. What is it? Zoe asked. Names, he said quietly. Dates. Transactions. He looked up, his expression a mixture of shock and fury. This is a record of everyone involved in the art theft ring 20 years ago. Police, politicians, crime families. He stopped, his jaw clenching. Everyone. Is your father's name in there? Zoe asked. No. but several people who worked for him are. Dominic's voice went hard. He was investigating his own organization. And someone found out. Mason leaned over to look at the ledger. He swore viciously. Boss, if this gets out, it changes everything, Dominic finished. The people listed here, some of them are still in power. Still operating. This ledger proves they were dirty 20 years ago. They'll kill to keep this quiet, Diego said. They already did, Zoe said softly. They killed my parents. They killed your father. And now they're trying to kill us. Dominic closed the ledger and looked at her. This is what they've been looking for. What your parents died protecting. Evidence that could destroy some of the most powerful people in New York. Then we use it, Zoe said. We expose them. We make sure everyone knows what they did. It's not that simple, Mason said. These people have resources, power, and connections. Going public could get us all killed. And keeping quiet keeps them in power, Zoe countered. Let's let them keep hurting people. Keep stealing. Keep killing. Her voice rose, filled with 20 years of suppressed anger. My mother died for this. My father died for this. I've lived my whole life in poverty because these people took my parents from me. I won't let them win. She looked at each of them. Mason, Diego, and finally Dominic. People like this, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. They count on us being too scared to fight back. They count on good people staying silent while they destroy lives. They're bullies with money and power, and they think that makes them untouchable. Zoe took a breath, thinking about everyone who'd ever looked through her like she didn't exist. Everyone who'd treated her like garbage because she was poor. Every system that had failed her, every person who'd kicked her when she was down. I'm done being silent, she said. I'm done letting people like this win. And if you can't stand people who abuse their power, who hurt innocent people to protect their secrets, who think money and influence put them above justice, hit that subscribe button right now. Only corrupt elites and their enablers won't. Comment, justice for all, if you believe everyone should be held accountable, regardless of their bank account or their title. She looked directly at Dominic. Then stand with me. Help me make this right. The room was silent. Then Dominic smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. There's the fighter, he said softly. He looked at Mason and Diego. She's right. We're done playing defense. It's time to burn it all down. Diego grinned. About damn time. Mason sighed but nodded. This is going to get messy. Good, Dominic said. I'm tired of cleaning. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Get me Victoria Chen. Tell her I have a story that's going to win her a Pulitzer. Zoe's heart pounded. Victoria Chen? The investigative journalist. The best there is, Dominic confirmed. If anyone can break this story and live to tell about it, it's her. A voice crackled through the phone. Dominic stepped away to talk, his voice low and urgent. Mason looked at Zoe with something like respect. You've got guts, Miss Carter. I'll give you that. I've got nothing left to lose, Zoe said. That makes me dangerous. Yeah, Mason said, a smile tugging at his mouth. It does. Victoria Chen arrived at Dominic's house 3 hours later. She was a small Chinese-American woman in her 40s with sharp eyes behind designer glasses and an expression that suggested she'd seen every lie the world had to offer and wasn't impressed by any of them. She swept into Dominic's study like she owned it, set her laptop bag on his desk, and looked around at the assembled group. Dominic, Zoe, Mason, Diego, and 3 other men whose names Zoe still didn't know. This better be good, Romano, Victoria said. I cancelled dinner with a senator to be here. It's better than good, Dominic said. He slid the ledger across the desk to her. Victoria picked it up, flipped it open, and went very still. For 2 full minutes, she read in silence. The only sound was pages turning. Finally, she looked up. Holy shit. Yeah, Dominic said. Do you know what this is? Victoria's voice was hushed, almost reverent. This is every major art theft, money laundering scheme, and political bribery operation in New York for 2 years. This is... She flipped pages. This is Assistant Chief of Police Robert Henshaw. State Senator Patricia Moreno. Federal Judge Andrew Blackwell. Crime families, auction houses, galleries. She looked at Dominic. Where did you get this? From my father, Dominic said. And from Zoe's parents. They compiled it 20 years ago. Then they died for it. Victoria's gaze shifted to Zoe. You're Naomi Carter's daughter? Zoe blinked. You knew my mother? I knew of her. I was a junior reporter 20 years ago, covering crime in Brooklyn. Your mother's death was listed as natural causes, but there were whispers. People who thought it was convenient that she died right after her husband disappeared. Victoria's expression softened. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, Zoe said quietly. Victoria turned back to Dominic. If I publish this, people will die. You understand that, right? The people named in this ledger, they still have power, money, and connections. They'll come after everyone involved. They're already coming after us, Zoe said. They burned down my home. They tried to kidnap me today. They've been killing and stealing and destroying lives for 20 years, and they keep getting away with it because people are too afraid to fight back. Victoria studied her. You're not afraid? I'm terrified, Zoe admitted. But I'm more angry than scared. These people took everything from me. From families like mine. They think they're untouchable because they have money and power. She leaned forward. But they're just bullies. And I'm done letting bullies win. A slow smile spread across Victoria's face. I like you. She looked at Dominic. I'll do it. But I need corroboration. The ledger is good, but a defense attorney will argue it's fake, outdated, and circumstantial. I need current connections. Proof that these people are still dirty. I can give you that, Mason said. He pulled out his tablet. We've been tracking financial transactions for weeks. Several of the names in that ledger? They're still moving money through shell corporations. Still laundering. Still stealing. We just couldn't prove where it started. Now you can, Victoria said. She pulled out her laptop. Show me everything. For the next 2 hours they worked. Victoria asked rapid-fire questions, taking notes, and cross-referencing the ledger with Mason's research. Dominic made calls, pulling in favors from contacts Zoe didn't know he had. Diego coordinated security, increasing patrols around the house. Zoe sat in the corner, feeling useless until Victoria suddenly turned to her. Zoe, I need you to tell me about your mother. Everything you remember. What she was like, what happened to her, and what your life was like after she died. Why? Zoe asked. Because this story isn't just about corruption and crime, Victoria said. It's about the human cost. The families destroyed, the children left behind. You're the face of that cost. Your story makes this real. Zoe's stomach twisted. I don't want to be the center of attention? Victoria finished. I get it. But someone needs to speak for the victims. Might as well be one of them. Zoe looked at Dominic. He nodded slightly, his expression saying, Your choice. Zoe took a breath. Okay. What do you want to know? Victoria opened a recording app on her phone. Start from the beginning. Tell me about your mother. So Zoe did. She talked about the few memories she had. Her mother's smile, her singing, the way she'd held Zoe close even when the cancer was eating her alive. She talked about the aftermath. Foster care, aging out of the system at 18 with nothing. The jobs that barely paid enough to survive. The rooming houses, the shelters, the nights on the street. She talked about what it felt like to be invisible. To be treated like trash because she was poor. To work harder than anyone she knew and still barely survive because the system was rigged against people like her. And she talked about the anger. The bone-deep fury at a world that let some people live in mansions while others froze on sidewalks. That lets powerful people steal and kill and destroy with no consequences, while people like her mother die because they can't afford treatment. By the time she finished, her voice was hoarse and there were tears on her cheeks. The room was silent. Victoria stopped the recording. Thank you, she said softly. That took courage. It took anger, Zoe corrected. Sometimes they're the same thing. Victoria spent another hour on her laptop, typing furiously. Finally, she sat back. I have enough for a first article. I'll publish it tomorrow morning on the Tribune's website. Front page, full spread. Once it's out, there's no taking it back. Good, Dominic said. The people named in this ledger will lawyer up immediately, Victoria warned. They'll call it a hit piece, fake news, a conspiracy theory. They'll come after me, the Tribune, and everyone connected to this story. Including you, Zoe. Let them come, Zoe said. Her voice was steady. I'm not hiding anymore. Victoria smiled. You're either very brave or very stupid. Can't I be both? That got a laugh. Victoria packed up her laptop and stood. I'll be in touch. Dominic, keep her safe. If anything happens to her before this story breaks, we lose our best witness. Nothing's going to happen to her, Dominic said with absolute certainty. After Victoria left, the house settled into tense quiet. Mason went to check on the security teams. Diego disappeared to make more calls. The other men filtered out, leaving Zoe and Dominic alone in his study. You did well today, Dominic said. What you told Victoria, that wasn't easy. None of this is easy, Zoe said. She was exhausted, wrung out emotionally. But it's necessary. Dominic walked over to where she sat and crouched in front of her. The same position he'd been in when they first met on the Brooklyn sidewalk. It felt like a lifetime ago. I need you to understand something, he said quietly. After that article is published tomorrow, everything changes. The people named in that ledger will know we have evidence against them. They'll know you're the one who provided it. They'll come after you with everything they have. I know. No, I don't think you do. Dominic's voice was intense. These aren't street thugs or small-time criminals. These are people with resources, connections, and the ability to make people disappear. They'll try to discredit you, destroy your reputation. And if that doesn't work, they'll try to kill you. Then you'll protect me, Zoe said simply. Isn't that what you promised? Yes. But Zoe, he paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. I can't lose you. Do you understand? I can't. He stopped himself, jaw clenching. Zoe's heart hammered. Can't what? Dominic stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back to her. I'm getting too close. I know I am. I told myself this was about justice, about protecting someone who needed help. But somewhere along the way it became about you. About wanting you safe, not because it's the right thing to do, but because the thought of something happening to you makes me. He cut himself off again. Zoe stood and walked over to him. Makes you what? He turned to face her. The emotion in his eyes stole her breath. Makes me forget every rule I've ever had about keeping distance, he said roughly. About not letting people close. About protecting myself from caring too much. I look at you, and all those rules disappear. Dominic, you should leave, he said abruptly. After the article publishes and the initial chaos settles, you should take the money Victoria's going to pay you for your story and disappear. Start over somewhere safe. Somewhere far from me and this world and everything that comes with it. Zoe stared at him. You want me to leave? I want you safe, Dominic said. And being near me is the opposite of safe. What if I don't want safe? Zoe asked. What if I want? She didn't finish the sentence. Couldn't. But Dominic's eyes darkened like he heard it anyway. The air between them crackled. Zoe. Her name was a warning. Or a plea. She couldn't tell. You said I was strong, she whispered. That I was a fighter. You said I could be anything I wanted. You can. Then let me choose this. Let me choose you. Dominic's control visibly cracked. You don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do. I'm asking for something real. Something that's mine. Not something handed to me. Not charity or pity or obligation. Something I choose because I want it. She stepped closer. Because I want you. Zoe, His voice was strained. I'm not a good man. I've done things. Hurt people. This world I live in, it's violent and dangerous and you pulled me off a street corner and gave me hope when I had none, Zoe interrupted. You believed me when no one else would have. You're fighting for justice for people you've never met because it's the right thing to do. You're protective and stubborn, and you carry too much weight on your shoulders, but you're good, Dominic. Whether you believe it or not. Something in his expression crumbled. If I do this, he said quietly, if I let myself care about you the way I want to, I won't be able to let you go. You understand that? Good, Zoe said. Because I don't want to go. The last thread of Dominic's control snapped. He closed the distance between them in one step, his hands coming up to cup her face, and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, hungry, like he'd been holding back for too long and couldn't anymore. His mouth moved against hers with an intensity that made Zoe's knees weak. She grabbed onto his shoulders for balance and kissed him back with everything she had. All the fear, the anger, and the loneliness she'd carried for so long poured into that kiss. And all of Dominic's carefully controlled emotion, the walls he'd built, the distance he'd maintained, it all shattered. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea, he murmured. Probably, Zoe agreed. You're going to drive me insane. Definitely. Despite everything, he smiled. Really smiled. Warm and genuine. I don't deserve you. Probably not, Zoe said. But you're stuck with me anyway. Yeah, Dominic said softly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in that gentle way he had. I am. He kissed her again, softer this time. Tender. Like a promise. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, finding comfort in the simple fact of not being alone. Outside, night fell over Brooklyn. Security teams patrolled the perimeter. Somewhere in the city, Victoria Chen was finalizing an article that would change everything. And in Dominic Romano's study, two people who'd spent their lives building walls finally let them fall. The article dropped at 6 a.m. Zoe woke to the sound of Dominic's phone ringing. She was in her own room. They'd reluctantly separated around midnight, but she heard the commotion. She got dressed quickly and found Dominic in his study, already on his third phone call, with Mason and Diego flanking him. Yes, I'm aware, Dominic said into the phone, his voice tight. No, I'm not commenting at this time. Direct all questions to Victoria Chen at the Tribune. He hung up, and immediately another call came in. Boss, we've got a problem, Mason said, looking at his tablet. The article's gone viral. Every major news outlet is picking it up. Twitter's exploding. And we're getting calls from, he paused. From everyone. Reporters, lawyers, police. Good, Dominic said. That means people are paying attention. Diego's phone buzzed. He answered and listened, then his face went grim. We've got movement outside. 3 cars are watching the house. Cops? Dominic asked. Don't know yet. Dominic cursed softly. He looked at Zoe. Stay inside. Don't go near the windows. What's happening? Zoe asked. Mason turned his tablet to show her. The Tribune's website filled the screen, with Victoria's article front and center. 20 years of corruption. How NYC's elite ran a criminal empire and got away with murder. Below it was a photo of the ledger. And below that, a photo of Zoe. Her stomach dropped. She used my picture? You're the human element, Dominic said. The victim who survived to tell the story. Zoe scrolled through the article. It was devastating. Victoria had woven together the ledger entries with Mason's financial research and Zoe's personal testimony into a narrative that was impossible to ignore. She'd named names. Printed evidence. Quoted directly from the ledger. And she'd ended with a question that was already trending on social media. If these people were willing to kill 20 years ago to protect their secrets, what will they do now? This is going to start a war, Mason said quietly. It already has, Dominic replied. His phone rang again. This time, when he answered, his expression changed. Hardened. Are you sure? He said into the phone. Pause. Where? Another pause. We'll be ready. He hung up and looked at his team. That was my contact in the police department. There's a warrant out for Zoe's arrest. Zoe's blood went cold. What? Theft of evidence, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to defame public officials, Dominic rattled off. They're calling the ledger a forgery. Saying you made it up for money. That's insane. I didn't even know about the ledger until yesterday. They don't care about the truth, Mason said. They care about discrediting the story. Which means discrediting you, Dominic added, his voice hard. If they arrest you and put you in a cell, you become vulnerable. And I guarantee someone will get to you before you can testify to anything. Fear clawed up Zoe's throat. So what do? We don't let them arrest you, Dominic said simply. He looked at Diego. How many men do we have on site? 12, plus the perimeter teams. Not enough if they send SWAT. Dominic pulled out his phone and made a call. Tony, I need every available man at my location. Now. He paused. I don't care if it leaves the other sites vulnerable. This is priority 1. Over the next 30 minutes, the house transformed into a fortress. Men arrived in groups, armed and serious. Windows were covered. Exits were secured. Someone set up monitors showing security camera feeds from every angle. Zoe watched it all with growing dread. This is because of me, she said to Pearl, who'd appeared with coffee and a grim expression. All these people, this danger. It's because I wanted to fight back. Baby, Pearl said firmly, this is because powerful people are scared of the truth. That's not on you. That's on them. But. No buts. Pearl set down the coffee and took Zoe's hands. Those people in that article? They're the ones who profit off keeping people like you down. Those who destroy lives to protect their wealth and power. They're modern-day thieves and murderers hiding behind fancy titles and expensive suits. She squeezed Zoe's hands. And you? You're shining a light on them. Making them answer for what they've done. That takes courage that most people don't have. So don't you dare feel guilty for their crimes. Tears pricked Zoe's eyes. I'm scared. Of course you are. But you've got Dominic. You've got all of us. And we don't let our people fall. Pearl pulled her into a hug. You're family now, honey. And we protect family. The word settled into Zoe's chest. Family. She'd been alone for so long, she'd forgotten what that felt like. Mason's voice cut through the moment. Boss, they're here. Everyone moved to the monitors. 4 police cars had pulled up outside, along with 2 unmarked sedans. Officers emerged. Maybe 15 total. But Zoe's eyes caught on one man in particular. Older, white, with silver hair and a face she'd seen in the article. That's him, she whispered. That's Robert Henshaw, the assistant chief from the Ledger. He's coming himself, Dominic said, his voice deadly quiet. Bold move. Mason's expression was grim. He wants to make sure it's done right. Make sure Zoe doesn't make it to a cell. The doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the tense house like a gunshot. Dominic straightened his shoulders, his face becoming a mask of calm authority. Diego, Mason, with me. Everyone else stay ready. He looked at Zoe. Walked over and cupped her face in his hands. Trust me. With my life, she said. He kissed her, briefly but intensely. Then he walked to the front door. Zoe watched on the monitor as Dominic opened the door. Assistant Chief Henshaw stood there, flanked by officers. Dominic Romano? Chief Henshaw. Dominic's voice was cool and polite. What can I do for you? We have a warrant for the arrest of Zoe Carter. We have reason to believe she's on these premises. Do you now? Mr. Romano, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. How about we do it the legal way? Dominic interrupted. He pulled out his phone and pressed a button. A voice crackled through on the speaker. This is Judge Patricia Winters. Mr. Romano, is there a problem? Henshaw's face went white. Chief Henshaw is at my door with a warrant to arrest my houseguest, Dominic said calmly. I was hoping you could verify its validity. Let me see the warrant, Judge Winters said. One of the officers handed a document to Dominic. He held it up to his phone's camera. A pause. Then Judge Winters' voice, cold as ice. This warrant is improperly filed and lacks probable cause. Chief Henshaw, you violate procedure. That warrant is void. Henshaw's jaw clenched. Your Honor, with all respect. No respect due, Chief. The warrant is void. If you enter that property or attempt to detain Miss Carter, you'll violate her civil rights. And given the article published this morning, I suspect that violation would be very public. Are we clear? Henshaw looked like he'd swallowed glass. Clear, Your Honor. Good. Mr. Romano, Miss Carter is free to remain where she is. I'll be filing a restraining order against any further harassment within the hour. Thank you, Judge Winters, Dominic said. The call ended. Dominic looked at Henshaw with cold satisfaction. I believe you were leaving? For a moment, Zoe thought Henshaw would push it. Would try something stupid. But then he stepped back. This isn't over, Romano. No, Dominic agreed. It's not. But next time you come for what's mine, make sure your paperwork is in order. What's mine? The words echoed through the monitor, through Zoe's chest. Henshaw and his officers retreated to their cars and drove away. If you believe people like Henshaw, people who abuse their badge and power to protect criminals, should face consequences, smash that like button, Zoe said, her voice carrying through the room. Comment, no one is above the law, if you stand for real justice. Only corrupt cops and the people they protect will stay silent. The house erupted in quiet celebration. Men clapped Dominic on the back. Diego grinned. Even Mason looked pleased. Dominic walked back inside and found Zoe immediately. Pulled her into his arms. Told you, he murmured against her hair. I've got you. That was incredible, Zoe said, her heart still racing. How did you, Judge Winters? Owed me a favor, Dominic said. And she hates corruption more than anyone I know. Once I showed her Victoria's article this morning, she was all in. So I'm safe. For now, Dominic said. But Henshaw's right. This isn't over. They'll try again, a different approach. Let them try, Zoe said fiercely. I'm not backing down. Dominic smiled and kissed her forehead. I know. That's what scares me. But Zoe could see the pride in his eyes. And for the first time in her life, she felt powerful. Not because she had money or connections or influence, but because she'd found something worth fighting for. Justice. Truth. And people who stood beside her when the world pushed back. The next 48 hours were chaos. Victoria's article sparked a firestorm. Other journalists picked up the story, digging deeper. Social media exploded with hashtags. Hashtag Justice for Naomi, hashtag Corruption Exposed, and hashtag Zoe Carter. People shared the article millions of times. Protesters gathered outside City Hall demanding investigations. And the people named in the ledger scrambled. Some lawyered up immediately, releasing statements denying everything. Others went silent and disappeared from public view. A few, the smart ones, reached out to prosecutors, offering to cooperate in exchange for immunity. The house of cards was collapsing. But cornered animals were the most dangerous. Zoe learned that lesson on the third day. She was in the kitchen with Pearl, trying to feel useful by chopping vegetables for dinner, when every phone in the house started ringing at once. Dominic appeared in the doorway, his face grave. Zoe, come with me. Now. The tone of his voice sent ice through her veins. She followed him to the study, where Mason and Diego were already waiting, along with two other men she'd come to know, Tony and Marcus. What's wrong? Zoe asked. Mason turned his laptop to face her. On the screen was a live news broadcast. A press conference. And standing at the podium was Senator Patricia Moreno, one of the names from the ledger. These baseless accusations are nothing more than a coordinated attack by organized crime, Moreno was saying, her voice strong and authoritative. Dominic Romano is a known crime boss who has fabricated evidence to discredit legitimate public servants. And this young woman, Moreno's face filled with practiced sympathy, Zoe Carter is clearly a victim of his manipulation. Zoe's jaw dropped. What? She's flipping the narrative, Diego said grimly. Making you the victim and Dominic the villain. But that's insane. The ledger is real. Doesn't matter, Mason interrupted. She's got 3 other senators standing behind her, 2 judges, and the current chief of police. They're forming a united front, claiming the whole thing is a criminal conspiracy. They're going to try to arrest me, Dominic said calmly. Charge me with evidence tampering, extortion, maybe RICO violations. Anything to discredit the ledger and silence us. Can they do that? Zoe asked, panic rising. They can try. Dominic's voice was steel. But I've been preparing for this. He pulled out his phone and made a call. It's time. Release everything. Release what? Zoe asked. Dominic smiled. Sharp and dangerous. Insurance. Within minutes, Mason's tablet started pinging with notifications. He pulled up a website, a secure server, and Zoe's eyes widened. Thousands of documents. Financial records. Emails. Recorded phone conversations. Photographs. 20 years of evidence. All digitized and time-stamped. My father wasn't just investigating, Dominic said. He was documenting. Everything. Every transaction, every meeting, every payoff. He stored it all in multiple locations. Physical and digital. When he died, the digital files were locked behind encryption I couldn't break. Until 3 weeks ago. What happened 3 weeks ago? Zoe asked. I received a key. From someone who'd been holding on to it for 20 years, waiting for the right moment. Dominic's expression softened. From Vincent Marino. Zoe gasped. The man from the marine supply store? Your mother gave him 2 things before she died. The ledger which we found, and a digital encryption key, which he sent to me anonymously when he realized someone was hunting for the evidence again. Dominic gestured to the screen. This is everything my father and your parents compiled. Every piece of proof needed to bring these people down. It's been uploading to multiple servers for the last hour. Journalists, federal prosecutors, and FBI field offices. They're all getting copies as we speak. And now it's public, Mason added. Irreversible. Even if they kill all of us, the evidence is out there. The weight of it hit Zoe. We won. Not yet, Dominic said. They still have power. Still have resources. And desperate people do desperate things. As if summoning them with his words, Tony's radio crackled to life. Boss, we've got multiple vehicles approaching. Fast. Maybe 10 cars. Everyone moved at once. Zoe found herself pulled into the center of the house, surrounded by armed men. Dominic barked orders, his people moving with military precision. This is it, Mason said, checking his weapon. They're making their move. Through the security monitors, Zoe watched as vehicles screeched to a stop outside the house. Men poured out. Not police this time. Private security, maybe. Hired muscle. And leading them was a man Zoe recognized from the photographs in the ledger. Andrew Blackwell. Federal judge. One of the most corrupt names in the entire investigation. He's here himself, Diego muttered. Must be really desperate. Dominic pulled out his phone and dialed. A voice answered. Male. Authoritative. This is Assistant Director Morrison, FBI. Mr. Romano, we're 3 minutes out. Hold your position. Copy that, Dominic said. He looked at his team. The FBI's en route. We just need to hold them off. Or, Zoe said suddenly, an idea forming, we give them what they came for. Everyone looked at her. They're here for me, right? Zoe continued, her heart pounding but her voice steady. They think if they can silence me and discredit me, the whole story falls apart. So let's use that. Absolutely not, Dominic said immediately. You're not putting yourself in danger. I'm already in danger, Zoe interrupted. But if I go out there and talk to Blackwell while the FBI is on their way, we can get him on record. Make him say something incriminating. She's right, Mason said slowly. If we can get him to threaten her, admit to anything, while we're recording. No, Dominic repeated, his voice hard. It's too risky. Zoe walked over to him and took his hands. Dominic. These people have spent 20 years hiding behind their power and privilege. They've hurt people, destroyed families, and gotten away with it because no one was brave enough, or privileged enough, to stand up to them. She looked into his eyes. I'm not privileged. I've spent my whole life being pushed around by people who thought they were better than me because they had money and I didn't. I'm done being pushed around. And I'm done letting people like Blackwell and Moreno and Henshaw win. People like Judge Blackwell abuse the system, destroy families, and think they'll never face consequences. If you can't stand people like him, people who think being rich and connected puts them above the law, then subscribe right now. Comment accountability for all. If you believe justice should be blind, not bought. Only people who profit from corruption will stay silent. She raised her voice slightly, knowing the others were listening. These people are bullies. They abuse their power, they crush anyone who threatens them, and they think money and status put them above the law. They think we'll be too scared to fight back. Zoe squeezed Dominic's hands. But I'm not scared anymore. And if you can't stand people who abuse their power, who think being rich and connected means they can destroy lives without consequences, Then stand with me. Help me end this. The room was silent. Then Dominic closed his eyes and swore softly. You're going to give me a heart attack before this is over. Is that a yes? It's a you're wearing a wire and surrounded by armed guards, and if anything goes wrong, I'm pulling you out immediately. He looked at Mason. Get her wired up. And get every man we have in position. 5 minutes later, Zoe stood at the front door, a tiny microphone hidden under her shirt, an earpiece tucked in her ear so small it was invisible. We've got you, Dominic's voice came through the earpiece. You're not alone. Zoe took a deep breath and opened the door. Andrew Blackwell stood on the front steps, flanked by 6 large men in tactical gear. He was in his 60s, white, with a kind of face that suggested he'd spent his life being obeyed without question. Miss Carter, he said, his voice smooth. We need to talk. About what? Zoe asked, keeping her voice steady. About the lies you've been spreading. The false evidence you've fabricated to destroy good people's reputations. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We can make this very simple. You recant your story, admit you were coerced by Dominic Romano, and we'll see that you're protected. Compensated, even. You want me to lie and say the ledger is fake? I want you to tell the truth, Blackwell said. That you're a troubled young woman who was manipulated by a criminal organization. Zoe felt anger burn through her fear. The only criminals here are the people named in that ledger. People like you, Judge Blackwell. You took bribes. You laundered money. You helped cover up murders. Blackwell's expression hardened. Careful, Miss Carter. Slander is a serious crime. It's not slander if it's true, Zoe shot back. My mother died because of people like you. My father was killed because he tried to expose your operation. You've spent 20 years profiting off stolen art and dirty money while people like me starved on the streets. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Zoe's voice rose. You're a thief. A murderer. You hide behind your judge's robe and pretend you're respectable, but you're just a criminal with better lawyers. Blackwell's mask of civility cracked. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. You have no idea who you're dealing with, girl. Do you think some newspaper article scares me? I have connections that go all the way to the top. I can make you disappear like your parents disappeared. No one will even remember your name. I'm recording this, Zoe said quietly. Every word. And it's being broadcast live to the FBI, multiple news outlets, and about 50,000 people on social media. Blackwell went white. Behind Zoe, Dominic stepped out of the house, phone in hand, its camera pointed at Blackwell. Including the part where you just admitted to murdering her parents. That was particularly helpful. The sound of sirens filled the air. Multiple vehicles screeched to a stop, FBI, actual police, and several news vans that had apparently been tipped off. Blackwell spun, looking for an escape route, but Dominic's men had formed a perimeter. His own security team was already backing away, hands up, wanting no part of what was coming. Andrew Blackwell, a woman's voice called out. An FBI agent emerged from one of the vehicles, badge held high. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, obstruction of justice, and threatening a federal witness. Blackwell's face was the color of old newspaper. You can't. I'm a federal judge. You were a federal judge, the agent corrected. As of about 10 minutes ago, you were suspended pending investigation. Turns out threatening witnesses on camera is frowned upon. Hands behind your back. Agent swarmed forward, cuffing Blackwell and reading him his rights. Camera crews captured everything. And Zoe stood there, watching the man who'd helped murder her parents get dragged away in handcuffs, and felt something she hadn't felt in 20 years. Justice. The next week was a blur. Arrests happened daily. Senator Moreno was indicted. Chief Henshaw resigned and was charged. 3 judges, 2 police lieutenants, and a dozen other officials either confessed or were arrested based on the evidence Dominic had released. The art theft ring was exposed. Millions in stolen goods were recovered. Families who'd been victimized 20 years ago finally got answers. And Zoe became the face of it all. She gave interviews, testified before a grand jury, and told her story over and over until it stopped hurting quite so much to say the words. Victoria Chen won her Pulitzer. The Tribune ran a follow-up series on systemic corruption and the victims it left behind. And slowly, painfully, the city began to heal. 2 months after the article was first published, Zoe stood in a cemetery in Brooklyn, holding flowers. Dominic stood beside her, his hand in hers. "I wish they could have seen this," Zoe said quietly, looking down at her mother's grave. Her father's name had been added to the headstone. His body was never recovered, but at least now he had a memorial. Wish they could have known that their work mattered. That they didn't die for nothing. "They knew," Dominic said softly. "They knew what they were protecting. They knew someone would finish what they started." "You think they knew it would be me?" "I think your mother knew exactly what kind of woman you'd become. Strong. Brave. Someone who fights for what's right even when it's terrifying." Zoe laid the flowers on the grave. "I'm going to make sure their story is remembered. I'm setting up a foundation for families affected by corruption and violence, to help people who fall through the cracks like I did." "The Carter Webb Foundation," Dominic said. Zoe looked at him surprised. "You knew. You mentioned it 3 times last week. I had my lawyers draw up the paperwork. It's waiting for your signature." Tears pricked Zoe's eyes. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." Dominic pulled her into his arms. "You want to help people. I want to help you help people. That's how this works." "This?" Zoe asked, smiling through tears. "Us." He kissed her forehead. "Partners. In all things." "I like the sound of that." They stood there for a while, in the quiet of the cemetery, saying goodbye to the past and hello to the future. When they finally left, Zoe felt lighter than she had in years. 6 months later, Zoe stood in a newly renovated building in Brooklyn, watching as families filled the space. The Carter Webb Community Center was everything she'd dreamed of. Free meal services, job training, temporary housing assistance, and legal aid for people who couldn't afford lawyers. A place where people like her, forgotten, struggling, invisible, could find help. Pearl ran the kitchen. Diego oversaw security. Mason handled the finances. And Dominic funded it all, asking for nothing in return except the chance to watch Zoe shine. "You did it," he said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "You built something real." "We did it," Zoe corrected, leaning back against him. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "You could have," Dominic said. "You're stronger than you know. But I'm glad I got to help." Zoe turned in his arms. "I love you," she said. She'd said it before, but it still felt new. Still felt like magic. "I love you too," Dominic replied. "More than I thought I could love anything." He kissed her, soft and sweet, while around them people laughed and talked and built community in a space that existed because 2 people refused to let corruption and violence have the last word. Zoe Carter had spent 20 years being invisible. But she wasn't invisible anymore. She was seen, valued, loved. And she'd learned something important. Power didn't come from money or status or privilege. Power came from standing up when the world told you to stay down. From fighting back when everyone said you couldn't win. From choosing hope over despair, action over silence, and justice over comfort. Zoe had been poor, homeless, and forgotten. But she'd never been powerless. She just hadn't known it yet. Now she did. And she'd spend the rest of her life making sure no one else forgot it either. That night, Zoe and Dominic sat on the roof of his brownstone, their brownstone now. She'd moved in 3 months ago, watching the city lights. "Do you ever think about that night?" Zoe asked. "When you found me on the street?" "Every day," Dominic said. "Why did you really stop? Out of all the people in this city who needed help, why me?" Dominic was quiet for a moment. "Truthfully? I saw your pendant. Recognized it from my father's files. I thought you were a lead, a piece of the puzzle I'd been trying to solve for 15 years. And now?" He looked at her, and the love in his eyes stole her breath. "Now I know you weren't just a piece of the puzzle. You were the answer. To questions I didn't even know I was asking." "Like what?" "Like what happens when you spend years building walls to protect yourself from pain. Like whether someone broken can ever be whole again." He took her hand. "You taught me that strength isn't about being hard or untouchable. It's about being vulnerable and choosing to care anyway. About letting people in even when it's scary." Zoe squeezed his hand. You taught me I was worth caring about. That my life mattered. That I could be more than just someone who survived. I could be someone who thrived. You're going to change the world, Zoe Carter. We're going to change the world, she corrected. And looking out over Brooklyn, over the city that had tried to break them both and failed, Zoe believed it. Because she'd learned that the most powerful thing in the world wasn't money or influence or status. It was people who refused to give up. Who stood together against injustice. Who chose love over hate, hope over despair, and action over silence. Zoe had been the poor maid who slept outside at night. But she'd become so much more. A fighter. An advocate. A voice for the voiceless. And in Dominic Romano, the Mafia boss who'd taken her in and given her not just shelter, but partnership, respect, and love, she'd found her home. Not a place. A person. The night Brooklyn had tried to freeze her to death, it had instead delivered her salvation. And now, wrapped in Dominic's arms under a sky full of stars, Zoe Carter knew one thing for certain. Her story wasn't a tragedy. It was a triumph. And it was only just beginning. The end. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.